Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people truly believe the world's all about them. And in today's episode, guys, what is more entitled than a Karen who destroys a wedding, right? All because the day's not about her. Guys, if you've been married or are going to be married or have been to weddings, this one's for you because it's filled with disasters and cringe. You're going to be shaking your heads so hard. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. And as always, you can link or send your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So my youngest sister has always had issues with entitlement and taking advantage of others. If she doesn't get what she wants, she'll throw fits, be verbally abusive, etc. Now, I'm not trying to dispense armchair diagnoses, but she really does check every box of narcissistic personality disorder. So with that said, a few years ago, she announced her engagement to a nice guy who's a pushover. He's expressed not wanting to get married for a while, but she proposed to him. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and kept pressuring him to get married. He comes from a wealthier family than us, and he's good with money and investments. It's the perfect combination for my gold-digging sister to take advantage of, and have someone bankroll her delusions. He wanted a modest, local wedding so friends and family could attend. My sister decided that she wanted a fancy, expensive destination wedding outside the country. At the time, my husband and I didn't have the best paying jobs. He was working on a second degree, and we had goals of buying our first home together. So with that, we regretfully declined her invitation, because the trip would cost us $3,000 to $4,000, which we didn't have. It would also have to go on a credit card, and we didn't want debt. When we RSVP'd no, she said her and her now husband wanted to pay for everything so we could attend. My husband and I were floored because 1, that's a lot of money, and 2, my sister had never been one to offer to pay for anything. She's not only entitled, she's cheap and stingy. We accepted her offer with a lot of gratitude. My sister said to not worry about anything at all. She said she would book our flight, hotel, and everything, and to just sit back and relax because she really wanted us to be present at her wedding. She just gave us dates to put in time off requests at our jobs. A couple of months go by, and she asked my husband and I if we've booked our airplane tickets and hotels. And she said they keep getting more expensive the closer they get to the date, you know. Book now, or else you'll be paying so much money. And I'm thinking, what? Now, I've never expected anyone to give me anything, but my financial situation hasn't changed. We tell her that, and she says, well, my husband and I looked at all the prices a while ago, and it's way too much money, so you guys will have to take care of it yourselves. We ignored her, and we just went on with our goals. Months go by, and my husband and I both get better jobs, and we buy a house. My sister comes back again, and she asked if we've purchased our tickets, despite repeatedly telling her no. We tell her again no. And at this point, with our new jobs, we're not allowed to take time off yet, and we don't have enough paid time off anyway. When I started my job, they offered to honor upcoming events if I needed time off, but I said I didn't need anything since I planned to not go to the wedding. We didn't have any savings, and we took on a mortgage, so we can't tack on credit card debt too. I was just so annoyed with her constant just figure it out tantrums and if you really loved me speeches. I tried to frame it differently so maybe she could understand. I told her that attending her wedding would mean we would have to no-show at work. We would likely lose our jobs, not be able to pay our mortgage, and then lose our house. I say to her, so you're okay with my husband and I losing our jobs and house and risking homelessness so we could attend your wedding? What do you think she said to that? My sister has no concept of money because she's always manipulated people into paying for her. She's never been able to hold a job and she has no empathy for others, yet she thinks she's deserving of special treatment. I don't understand where it came from because our parents raised us to be hardworking and to not expect anything from anyone. Our parents and my husband and I can't afford to attend. Her parents' family could, and they wanted to go, but my sister decided that she wouldn't allow it because it would only be weird to have his family there and not mine. So she cut out his parents from their wedding. She put up a huge paywall, and then she blamed us for not coming, and then went no contact with us. It's honestly been a huge relief after a lifetime of her abuse. Holy moly, does OP's sister ever freaking sound exhausting. Not to mention super duper entitled, guys. Like, destination weddings are freaking pricey, and it's so entitled to expect your guests to spend thousands of dollars to attend, and then get upset when they tell you they can't afford to come. Like, what part of "I'm sorry, I'd rather have food on my table and the rent paid" does sister not understand? And guys, I do feel so bad for the husband's parents who had the means to come, and they were cut out from attending. Talk about a nightmare daughter-in-law, right? And seriously, I just want to say that her sister choosing to go no contact with OP is more of a blessing than anything. It's just nice when the trash takes itself out, right? And guys, if you think that was entitled, it's only going to get worse from here. Listen to this one. This next post left me shaking my head so hard, guys. I was a bartender for 14 years at a private club that was also a popular wedding venue. I've probably worked about 800 to 1,000 weddings total. Despite working so many weddings though, one stands out that I'll never forget. I was the head bartender and manager on duty for most of them, and I worked with the in-house event coordinator who handled all the logistics on our end prior to the event, like booking, catering, bar service, in-house decor, etc. She'd typically give me a heads up about guest requirements on my event sheet, and let me know if the client was being a headache beforehand. For this case, we were dealing with a third marriage for the bride. She was in her mid-40s, and a first marriage for the groom. The event coordinator gave me a heads up that the bride was a serious bridezilla, as she had dealt with her before. The woman had been emailing or calling about minor details 3 to 4 times a day for 3 months solid, and I was told to expect the worst. The big day comes, and the bride and her party's there to oversee the setup a few hours before the wedding, which is not out of the ordinary. Everything's running smoothly until flowers arrive, and she freaks out because it's not exactly what she ordered. Now, a note is, the flowers are gorgeous, by the way, but way over the top for what I'd expect for a 250-person wedding. I then have to calm her down and use my standard line saying, "No one's here to celebrate flowers, they're here to celebrate you," etc. We then get over that, and I'm expecting the worst for the night. It turned out to be lovely, and I was surprised. The bride is radiant the whole evening. Everyone's happy, the event runs smoothly, and I'm stoked to not have to be dealing with drama. At the end, when they're packing up, I go up to them and do my standard "How did everything go? Is there anything I can assist you with?" conversation with her, while hubby stands a few feet away talking to a friend. She then turns to me with stars in her eyes, and she says, "Oh, it was perfect. I can't wait for my next one. I want to do my next one here." Hearing that, hubby does a neck-snapping double take while I'm kind of speechless. I just manage to mumble, "I'm glad you enjoyed it." They then leave, and I try to process what I just heard, and it gets better. Often, wedding parties show up the next day to pick up things they left behind, so they don't have to spend an hour packing up late at night. When they do, we let them come down to the club bar for a drink if they want. The newly married bride and groom show up, and they come down to the bar where I'm working. At this point, I figure her next one comment was just a slip of the tongue, as she had some wine that night. But no. Talking to her straight sober with hubby in tow next to her, she told me again how it was everything she had hoped for, and she would definitely come back next time for her next one. And hearing that, that's when I put it all together. She's on her third marriage. This woman did not want to get married. She didn't want to settle down with the love of her life. She just loved being a bride and having a special day all about her. Now, I bet you didn't expect that ending, did you? Guys, I was left speechless when I read this post, and my heart is honestly broken for that man. Like, all I can think of is that poor guy is about to find out. Like, it's never good when the wife is like, "I can't wait for my next one here," right? Especially the night of the wedding. And the big question here is, how is she affording it? I can't help but to think that she's just looking for rich men to marry who will cover all expenses so she can keep feeling super duper special over and over again, which is super messed up, right? And if you think that was messed up, listen to this next post. Alright, this happened at a wedding I attended, and honestly, it's so ridiculous that you'd think it happened in a movie. But it was so real and cringeworthy, but also hilarious, so I'm sharing it with you all. Here's the backstory that's needed to paint the picture for you. My friend was getting married to the love of her life, and she had one of her best friends be a bridesmaid in the wedding. They had been best friends for 12 years, and both of them were in my friends group, so I've witnessed their relationship up close. The bridesmaid, who we'll call Karen, is a girl who, we'll always say, lives in her own head, with no idea how the real world works. The girl's very spoiled. At 32 years old, she still lives at home with her parents and they paid all her bills. She's also still in school, working on a degree that should have taken her 2 years, but she's on year 7 of it. She's constantly complaining about group projects that don't go well, but it's always her partner's fault. Common denominator, baby. If every single person you've worked with has issues, it's most likely you're the one that's hard to work with. And knowing her, I can tell you that she's very hard to be around. So backstory aside, Karen's in the wedding party. Leading up to the wedding, you could tell things weren't going well. I walked in on her cry screaming at the bride, how she was trying to do something nice for the bride. Immediately, I walked out because it was ugly. The bride insisted she didn't want to talk about Karen leading up to the wedding. One of the big issues was the plans to get ready the day of the wedding. The bridesmaid suggested a makeup artist for the bride, who then hired that makeup artist and her assistant to do the bride, mother of the bride, maid of honor, and 3 bridesmaids the morning of the wedding. The bride said the makeup artist would do her, her mother, and the maid of honor, and the assistant would do the 3 bridesmaids. Well, Karen then throws a fit because there was no way the assistant would be doing her. She needed to be done by the main artist, and she should go first. The bride tries to explain that it was most important to do herself, her mother, and the maid of honor, and drama ensues. The bride sits Karen down and tries to explain that her wedding day is about her. Every other day of the friendship is always about Karen, so she really needed to let her wedding day be about her. The message didn't really get through though. Leading up to the wedding, the bridesmaid was insistent on doing a speech. The groom told the bride multiple times to say no because he knew it wouldn't go well. But the bride caved because there was no saying no to Karen. Smart man he is. So the speech time comes along and it was a train wreck. Karen leads off the speech with how they've been friends for 12 years, but it would have been longer. How she had wanted to be friends with the bride long before that, but the bride was so mean to her and would always make fun of her with her friends. She then said she knew they had to be friends when one day she asked the bride if her pants made her look fat, and the bride said yes. She then knew that in that instant they had to be best friends. That quote, honesty was something she needed in life. Cue everyone wide-eyed and just staring in disbelief that she had painted the bride to be a huge bitch, which were lies, by the way. Karen then goes on with the speech, and she goes on to talk about the 2 times her own boyfriend tried to break up with her, and how he almost cheated. Those stories had nothing to do with the bride. To top it off, her boyfriend was at the wedding, totally red in the face, and spoiler alert, they're still together and now married. Unbelievable. She never even mentioned anything good about the bride in her speech. She never turned any of her stories around to say anything nice about the bride. She just shat on her in the first story and then talked about herself for the rest. The entire table I was sitting at was sitting there in shock. We were all trying to discreetly yell at her to stop talking and to sit down. It was hilarious but painful to watch. And here's the kicker. The next day, their friendship ended. Not because of the awful speech, not because the bride was hurt by the speech and her behavior leading up to the wedding, but because Karen ended it. Karen was so upset that the bride didn't like her speech. She genuinely thought that she made a good, thoughtful speech, and the bride and her husband should have loved it. The bride told her honestly that it was rude and in poor taste, and it was all about the bridesmaid. I guess Karen didn't appreciate her honesty after all because she couldn't forgive the bride for not liking that speech. And that was the end of their 12-year friendship. Honestly, good frickin' riddance, I would say. And seriously, with best friends like that, who the heck needs enemies in life, right? Honestly, I'm so shocked that the friendship lasted as long as it did because 12 years of that Karen and her entitlement is enough to make anyone lose their mind. And the saddest part about this is Karen wanted to steal the bride's thunder, and it worked because now, whenever people think about this couple's wedding day, it's not gonna be, oh, they were so gorgeous, we had so much fun. No. Nothing like that. The first thought is gonna be, do you remember that train wreck speech that girl made? What a wild wedding that was. With that said though guys, if you're planning a wedding in the future, remember this post when you're choosing people to do speeches, because that was painful. Like, what the heck? Letting your best friend give a speech and all they do is crap all over you. Like, I'm surprised Karen made it out of there alive, to be honest. And if you're thinking the same thoughts, the next Karen does the most outrageous thing ever. I've been stewing on this story for a few years now and decided it was time to finally voice it out. This happened back in the beginning of 2017. It involved John, who's my brother, Jane, my sister-in-law, and Susan, my half-sister. Back in 2016, my brother announced that he and his girlfriend of many years were engaged, and they were planning on having a wedding the following year. They gave 9 months notice to people who would be invited, and also told everyone what the color theme for the wedding would be. It would be purple. In that time, between the announcement and the wedding date, I was easily able to order a dress from an online retailer. I would have it sent to me and still had time to replace it if I needed to. I didn't. So 2017 comes and the wedding weekend arrived. I live in a different state to my brother, so I had to travel to attend the wedding. The wedding was absolutely gorgeous. It was a sunny day on a beach, and I couldn't help cry because my work of a brother was actually marrying the mother of his children and the love of his life. He had never seemed happier. John and Jane had 3 kids together already, and the 2 older were flower girls, which was sweet. Now, John is technically only my half-brother. We share a mom, but not dad growing up. It was my dad who raised John and I, so to him, my dad was his dad. My dad, prior to marrying my mom, had a first wife and a couple of kids with that wife, including Susan. John and I have always had some issues with Susan. She was only my half-sister, not John's, but he still included her in the wedding and such as a family member and guest. I hadn't noticed at the time as I was too caught up in the whirlwind of my brother's wedding ceremony. But Susan wasn't wearing purple. No. She was wearing white. To be more specific, she was wearing her white wedding dress to someone else's wedding. John and Jane were pissed, especially Jane. So cue the reception. Some people have changed clothes, and it was my first wedding, so I didn't think that far ahead. I still wore my soft lilac dress without a problem. So everyone was eating, had some drinks, interacted with the bride and groom, what I assumed to be normal wedding things. But Susan. Oh, Susan. Susan was feeling extremely sad and lonely because no one was paying attention to her. The 30-year-old woman who wore her wedding dress to someone else's wedding. I wonder why no one wanted to interact with her. Susan then began crying, maybe halfway through the reception. She was crying openly, loudly, in a way that clearly begged for somebody to come notice her. I'm a nice person, so I tried to be the good half-sister I should be, and I bit the bullet to go sit with her for a while, to ask her what was wrong. Susan tells me, no one's paying attention to me. Me, while staring at her confused a little, say, what do you mean? Susan says, everyone's talking with John and Jane, but no one's talking to me. And when I try to speak with John and Jane, they don't talk to me. I just sighed internally. I couldn't help but wonder why she couldn't connect the dots. I tell her, Susan, it's their wedding. Of course everyone's gonna be talking to them, and they're gonna be really busy. Susan says, I don't care. I'm John's sister, so he should talk with me more. And I'm thinking, actually, lady, you're not his sister. I am. But whatever. I was able to slip away and spend some time with other family who weren't acting as if this day was all about them. After the ceremony, Jane admitted to me that she was livid how Susan wore a wedding dress to her wedding. She had plenty of time to plan for the wedding and get appropriate attire, but when finally confronted, Susan said she had no other dress she could wear, so she had to wear her wedding dress. Now, this is perhaps a boring tale to most, but even 3, nearly 4 years later, I'm still pissed at my half-sister for doing that. My mom, John, and Jane are also pissed about it still. I've since cut contact with Susan. Oh, the second-hand embarrassment I felt reading this post, guys. Like, imagine breaking out in tears because someone else's wedding isn't all about you. Especially after you tried to stir up crap by showing up in a wedding dress. And I don't know about you guys, but I love Susan's lame excuse of I had nothing else to wear. Like, literally anything else would have been better. Like, she could have come to the wedding wearing cardboard, and it would be way less embarrassing than coming to someone else's wedding dressed in your own wedding dress. And did she really expect people to swarm her, ask for pictures, and tell her how beautiful she is? I'm glad she got what she deserved, which is absolutely nothing. So I work in the wedding industry, running a wedding flower company. I've been self-employed for 5 years and average 30 to 50 weddings per year. I always get asked if I deal with bridezillas, and the answer is yes. But you know who's worse? You know who's more entitled than bridezillas? Bridechillas. It's a term I made up quite early into my career for people who are too relaxed about their wedding day. Let me explain. This is what it's like to work with a bridechilla. At the consultation, they're so cool. They don't care. It's just a wedding, no big deal. They're totally happy to go with the flow because, hey, they hired a pro for that reason, right? They repeatedly joke that I must love working with someone who's not a bridezilla for once. And so many times I've heard, oh my god, I must be the most relaxed bride you've ever met. Ha ha ha. Bridezillas get the quote, and they love it. But can we change all the mention of pink to lilac? Like, why didn't they mention lilac and only pink at their consultation? But meh, they're not worried about it. But now it has to be lilac. But that's all good, right? So you do another quote. But no, they just spoke to mom. And can we add 20 so-and-so items and throw it in and make the bouquet smaller? No more changes, I promise. It's always mom, dad, groom, sister, causing them so much grief. Never their own indecision or inability to stick to a plan. So you do another quote. Thanks so much for quote number 3. I love it. Lock us in. The deposit then gets sent, but usually paid late. After that, 6 months to a year passes, and we're now a few months from the wedding. At this time, Bridechilla realizes that she has heaps of updates. The bridesmaids' dresses aren't blush anymore, they're navy blue. Can we change the color scheme? She made this change in dresses 3 months ago, but she was so chill about it, she didn't think it was a big deal to update me. So I do a new quote. Thank you for quote number 4. I give them quote number 4, and they ask, why is there a change in price? It should be the same price. Oh, and can we change XYZ? So then I try to explain that this needs to stop happening. They exclaim that they're totally chill. If changes can't be made, then no big deal. So you write up quote number 5. Also, bridechillas often never reply either. So it's time for full payment. The invoice is sent. But oh crap, she forgot to mention that 2 months ago, she asked another friend to be a bridesmaid as well. So can we make changes for 6 bridesmaids? And can we do the extra stuff without throwing in extra costs? So excited for the big day though, and the payment comes in late. Now, if I'm lucky, there will be no changes come wedding week, but wedding day is always a disaster. She's usually unprepared, and she assumed I was throwing in heaps more extras than agreed. And she starts getting demanding, throwing the blame on me, telling me that I'm the reason her wedding's not going right. For example, Friday's just been bride. 2 days before the wedding, she says to me, oh hey, can you place some extra candles for me too? I explained it wasn't usually okay, but it would be okay if it was just a few. I was assured it was totally chill, just a few candles. It ends up being 130 individually wrapped tea light candle votives. 3 different varieties, all needing to be placed in a pattern, each with 1 centimeter of water at the bottom of the votive. It took me an additional 1.5 hours at the venue. Oh, and can I throw it in for free? So in conclusion, bridechillas think they're better than bridezillas. Their goal is to be a chilled out dream to work with. In reality, I would rather a bridezilla any day. At least they know what the heck they want. Plus, if a bridezilla acts awful, it's easy and understandable to snap back and tell them their behavior is out of order. But how the heck do you tell a client to stop being so relaxed and that no, I won't throw in things for free? Anyway, I hope that was interesting. Guys, this is such a unique post, and honestly so funny because I used to work in a job where I had to do one-on-one with customers. And I agree with OP, often the people who say, don't worry, I'm really easygoing, are 90% of the time the absolute worst to deal with. Like yeah, most people think that people throwing tantrums, screaming, etc. are the hard ones to work with, but in reality, it can be quite the opposite. Case in point, my friends. And that brings us to another end of r/EntitledPeople. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/IDon'tWorkHereLady episode, where a psycho Karen threatens to destroy everyone. when she doesn't get served. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.